Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Wednesday, May 21st. Derek VanRiper, Sarris, Jed Lowrie here, recording this on the early part of Tuesday, May 20th. We have some new toys from Baseball Savant we're going to dig into today, so we're really excited about that. Had a story from Ken Rosenthal and Jason Stark about automated balls and strikes being closer to the big leagues. We'll talk about what needs to be sorted out before that becomes a reality, perhaps as soon as 2026. And time permitting, we are going to have our mulligans for 2025. The calls we made before the season that we want back here in the final 10 days of May. How about that? If you haven't done it already, please join our Discord. You can do that with the link in the show description. And I love when the baseball news you should know is extremely nerdy, data-driven stuff. Like, I feel like that's the world just handing us a beautiful rundown to work with. So Baseball Savant this morning launched swing path and attack angle leaderboards. There are visuals. There are all sorts of things you can dig into. We're just a few hours into it. So this is day one of many, much like when the bat speed leaderboards dropped last year. The biggest thing that I think I want to put in front of both of you is a simple question of like, what do you want to see on these leaderboards? What do you think matters the most or is going to be most functionally helpful for people trying to analyze the game? Many of our listeners for fantasy purposes. Like, what are we trying to do with this flood of interesting new data?
Yeah, I mean, I think bat speed and swing tilt are the two biggest stats that you can put in concert that describe basically your raw power output, your raw power ability. Of course, there are guys that get to that more and guys who get to that less, but just putting that together, you could see something like, James Wood, right as soon as he gets to the big leagues, you can see, oh gosh, he's got a lot of tilt and a lot of bat speed. That's the combination that makes Aaron Judge so special. That's the combination that we're looking for in our very best power hitters, because that swing tilt, which is basically, if zero is a perfectly flat swing, which nobody has because the pitch is coming in at an angle, nobody wants a perfectly flat swing. But if zero is a perfectly flat swing tilt is how many degrees down off of that you are. So the higher that number is, the more vertical you are. And I guess that can lead to strikeouts. So we know that being very steep can make you vulnerable at the top of the zone. And but it also leads to great power outcomes because you're lifting the ball. You're doing a great job lifting the ball. So theoretically, at least, someone who has great bat speed and great lift should be someone that can hit for power. If you're missing one or two of those, I think it's going to be hard. Also, a lot of the other stuff I think is due to timing. So they're talking about attack angle, which is basically how the bat addresses the ball near contact. And so what's that angle of the bat towards the ball at contact? That's really useful for describing what happens on the play, but I don't know how useful it is for describing the player, because they even have a thing in Mike Petriello's excellent piece about how the attack angle changes a ton over the course of the swing. Just think about a swing is like a 3D thing. So, that's basically a timing stat again. So things like contact point and attack angle tell you more about timing, which is huge for what happens on that play. But I think a player can change his timing to a certain extent.
No, there's no doubt. And I think it's really contact point, right? Like contact point to me determines launch angle more than anything else, right? And where, you obviously the path tilt will allow you to lift balls that you wouldn't otherwise lift, but you said fastball up. It also exposes you to, 12-6 break, right? Like vertical break. So you get exposed on many different levels, and that flatter swing, like, you just look at the guys at the top of that swing path tilt. Like, these are the guys that are the more consistent, balls in play, hard hit balls, because it increases your margin of error. And, to when you're hitting at the big league level, giving yourself a chance to be productive, with every swing, that's where the margins matter. And you have to be a special player like an Aaron Judge to match the tilt that he has with the bat speed that he has.
Yeah, I think one important distinction I want to put out there at the beginning is being very high or very low. Having an extreme approach isn't necessarily bad. It's how it interacts with everything else you do, right? These metrics,
Right.
how concert matters a lot more than how they look in isolation.
And I've said this before, none of this stuff happens in a vacuum, right? Like this is not golf where you're hitting a stationary ball and you can make these adjustments. Like you're reacting in a very dynamic situation where there's somebody standing 60 feet away from you trying to get you out and moving the ball around. So none of this stuff happens in a vacuum. If we were playing home run derby and guys just grooving it in there and wanting you to hit the ball as far as you can, that's a very different dynamic than somebody standing 60 feet away from you trying to get you out.
Yeah, and I think you're right to say, like, we have on the Discord we have Dominic, who's a kind of a semi-pro coach that posts about these aspects, and he says to some extent, like, maybe having a flatter path is better because you can maybe then vary your tilt by changing your side bend. And what you can really see when you look at the flatter swing path tilt, so you're doing the smaller ones, 24, 25, 26 degree. Like you said, these are the guys who make contact. Alejandro Kirk is on here. You've got Miguel Andujar and Matt Chapman, who, although there's some swing and miss in here, but Santander is a guy who hits for power and makes a lot of contact. And then what you also have are guys who underperform their power. And so Vladimir Guerrero Jr., 75.8 degree bat speed, 75.8 mile per hour bat speed, 26 degree tilt, and 1 degree pull. Like that, you put that all together, and he's not always in the ideal attack angles. And the guy who looks almost exactly like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is Junior Caminero. He has even more bat speed, and just at 27 degree to 26 degree, they're both slightly pull, and they both don't hit in the ideal attack angle. Now, I think that's why we fall in love with these guys, because you're like, oh, what if you just pulled more? What if you, did this? What if you did this? We've tried to get, like, Vlad, lift the ball in the air more. And I think sometimes we forget all the good things they do and how this leads to success over and over again, and is not chasing power. Matt Chapman, for example, right now strikes out at sort of a 26, 27, 28%. He's on the higher end, right? If you told him, hey, let's get a ton of tilt in there and let's get the ball out in front and let's change your angles because you have such excellent bat speed, he might strike out at the 33, 34, 35% level.
Yep.
And that might not be viable. So you're moving the dials on all these things in different directions. And it's really hard to just be like, this equals good, this equals bad. But you see a guy like Hunter Goodman come in, and it's 74 mile an hour bat speed with a 26 degree swing path. And then he also pulls the ball, and he's in that ideal attack angle range. Like, all those things are in the red in a good way.
Yep. And that's, and I look at, so to me, the attack angle, to your point, it's really contact point, right? So Hunter Goodman has that flat swing, and he's just making contact out front more. Yeah. That's the way I would read that.
But that's a really good combo, right? Because the flat bat path will give you more. It's what people talk about getting on plane. And we see there seems to be a correlation between having a flatter bat path and having higher bat speeds. That's something you pointed out, Jed. Is like if you sort by lower swing path tilt, you get higher bat speeds. You sort the other way, you get lower ones. And so if you have a flatter bat path, you have more time. You're more time in the zone on plane. And if you get the ball out in front, and with that extra bat speed, you give yourself more time, right? So you give yourself more time to make the decision, and then when you like it, you can still get it out in front. Like then you get it in the part of the swing where it goes up,
exactly right,
towards up. So that's when people talk about getting on plane and doing it with a fast bat and like waiting to make your decision and still getting the ball out in front. That's like if you can do all that, it's maybe a little bit more likely, I think, when you have the flatter bat path. So I'd be really interested when we throw this all into some sort of bat path grade. I wouldn't be surprised if it really likes this combo of high bat speed and flatter bat path. But you know, the real unicorns are on the other side, and you pointed this out too. Aaron Judge, you know, with a huge, you know, really steep swing path, still able to get in ideal attack angles and swing that bat. That's why is it so hard? You said something kind of compelling. Why is it so hard to have a steep bat path and have plus bat speed?
I mean, you're fighting gravity, right? Like you have to be an Aaron Judge type physical, you know, presence to be able to fight gravity, produce elite bat speed, and hit the ball out front consistently, right? And then, like, you know, we're seeing the results of somebody who's obviously put in a lot of work, but is also physically gifted in a way that you could argue nobody else in the game has. And so you add all that up, and you know, we talk about Ohtani being a unicorn. Like Aaron Judge is every bit a unicorn in that regard on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, the closest comps I see are Riley Green and James Wood, who both have elite bat speed and this big tilt. They're both guys who have a different contact point, though. They go more oppo. They don't have the same ideal attack angle. And both of them, honestly, maybe Riley Green could go get the ball a little bit more, but James Wood, you have to be careful. Again, there's this sort of the Matt Chapman problem. If you tell him to go get the ball more, that strikeout rate is going to go up. And he already has a fair amount of swing and miss. He does have such elite bat speed, he can hit these balls out to the opposite field. And that's going to work fine as a young man. But there, you know, sometimes, you know, when we talk to the reason I love talking to Joey Votto so much was, you know, he was concerned about what can I do that would do the best for me over my whole career? Like, how can I have the longest career? And I do wonder if somebody like James Wood may not have the greatest denouement to his career because everybody loses bat speed over their career. And if he loses bat speed and is still going oppo, that's when those things, you know, sort of die at the warning track and you don't get the same value out of them. But, you know, once again, Jung-Hoo Lee, you know, stands out, you know, as pretty different from some of the other like lighter hitters, lighter bat speed guys. In fact, the guy that he looks a little bit like is Freddie Freeman in terms of not great bat speed, great tilt, great bat to ball, pretty good ideal attack angle percentage. And he goes and gets the ball a little bit more than some of the other contact approach guys. So just really interesting stuff here from StatCast.
Yeah, I think looking at the board the way you just described it, though, where you sort by highest swing path tilt to get Riley Green up at top at 46 degrees, it goes Freeman, James Woods 5th, Judge's 10th. Looking at it that way and seeing how much swing and miss is interspersed at the bats on that part of the leaderboard makes you appreciate what a player like Judge has done over the course of his career even more, or Freeman especially with less bat speed. Like the hit tool kind of comes through. You're like, wow, that's the gap right there. Like that's how it's closed. It's incredible bat to ball ability, because there are some guys on that list that will probably always strike out 28-30% of the time. They're not going to, with that approach, find a way to change that. But that's where I think this gets really tricky, is like you start to look and you find some guys that are kind of similar to each other. And sometimes you also are probably looking at a snapshot where someone's just not feeling right mechanically too. So you might hit a certain point, certain marker, and say, okay, we gotta get a few things right. You know, we're more oppo than we should be, or the angles aren't right. You kind of use this as like a guardrail to start making some adjustments, I think, when things are going the wrong direction.
Yeah, and I look at this list too, and if we're, you know, starting at the top with Riley at 46, and you go down, you know, by sorting it with the tilt, there's a lot of blue on average bat speed, right, in the top, you know, 30 on that list, and you flip it on top, and you go, you know, 24 degree. It takes a while to, you know, get down to the list, like until you're like in the blues, you know, it takes you down to 42. And so it just that the correlation between that flatter swing and bat speed, I think are pretty, they're I don't want to say they go hand in hand, but it's a lot easier to generate bat speed when you're swinging at a flatter plane because you're not fighting gravity. And so then once again, like nothing in extreme. Like I think, as you look at that list, a guy like Heston Kjerstad, who, is at a 38-degree tilt, but, as a young man who looks strong, his average bat speed 69.8. There might be an argument to say, hey man, if you get that tilt to, a little bit flatter, maybe let's get that to 35, 34, your bat speed might tick up. I would be willing to bet that if he flattened it out, he would pick up some bat speed.
Yeah. One thing that I would suggest though, maybe is that maybe that tilt is the hardest thing to change on this list. I mean, that's why I kind of want to stay away from using ideal attack angle percentage and attack direction, and contact point as the pillars of my analysis, because I feel like that's something that a player can be like, you know what, I'm going to let the ball travel a little bit more. I'm going to go get the ball. That's something that they could change with intention pretty quickly. I feel like it's just time. I mean, not like on a dime, but like, you talk about batters going when you go on rehab, right? You're like 2 weeks to get my timing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like maybe if somebody was like really wanted to change their timing, maybe 2 weeks from now they could change it, and so with, I think like swing path tilt, I think it's a little bit different. I looked at the biggest changers in swing path, in swing path tilt year over year. And, this is all the players, all the qualified hitters that have changed their angle by more than 2 degrees between last year.
That's the whole list.
That's the whole list. And you can see that most of it's 2 degrees. So if you're talking about 3 degrees or more, there are 6 people that have increased their tilt more than 3 degrees this year. Yep. And they're all very interesting. Josh Naylor, Riley Green, Wyatt Langford, Corbin Carroll, Zach Neto, Spencer Torkelson, they all have good bat speed. They all should be doing this, I think, because they have good bat speed and they're adding tilt. That should add power. But it also speaks to maybe how difficult it is to change because, even somebody like Corbin Carroll, we can go into in a moment, this is a big change, 4 degrees. So if you see anything 2+, 3+ change in a player, I would circle that. I think that's meaningful. Unfortunately, it's not something that we can anticipate year to year necessarily, right? If you saw Corbin Carroll last year and you said, 22-degree tilt, good bat speed, he's not going to be good for power. How do you anticipate? I guess you could anticipate because you could say, well, in 2023, if we had those numbers, you'd say, he had 26-degree tilt in 2023 when he hit for more power. And then in 2024, he had 22-degree tilt and he hit for less power. But the bat speed was the same. He could go back to doing that. If we'd seen these, we could have anticipated his power surge because we could have seen, what if he did last year's tilt? What if he did 2023's tilt with 2024's bat speed? That'd be pretty interesting. Well, it turns out it is pretty interesting. It's MVP level.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think, in terms of timing and like, for the most part, you get to this level, you have a pretty good awareness of your body. And so I think with direction, I think a lot of these guys can make those adjustments. Once again, it's going to be minute. You're talking about a couple degrees, but it's not, it's not impossible to make that change. It's hard to do during the season. I think that's really what it boils down to, because you still have to go out there and perform every single day. So making a big change, like if you're talking about timing, you're talking about 2 weeks, like that the timing of that isn't necessarily like, something you're training your mind and your mind's eye to see the ball, like tracking the ball coming in where my ideal contact point is. But a lot of that is wrapped up into all of this, the swing path, tilt, and your bat speed, right? So that the combination of those two things will then determine the contact point and the timing of it. And so I think, working on your swing path is probably best saved for the off season, but not something that, not something that is impossible to change.
I think it's interesting too, though. With Carroll, he's more aggressive now. Like, he's swinging more than he's ever swung before.
Who you said?
Probably
Corbin?
to get that contact point out
Yeah,
in front, right?
Yeah, he is just way more aggressive.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I haven't looked at him lately, but I think he's a guy. He's a guy. He doesn't chase a lot, does he? Let me see.
Historically, no, but he's up to a 37.3% O swing percentage right now.
Yeah, well,
he's striking out a little bit more, but it's an approach change that's worth it, right? You got 14 homers in 48 games. Like this is a great version of Corbin Carroll.
Yeah, and we talked about that last time, right? Where like it's worth you're not going up there to take a B swing, right? You don't get positive results by just trying to put the ball in play, and that's like you're going up there, you're trying you got to hit the ball hard, especially with defenses the way they are, like they know biomechanically where you're going to hit the ball, so you have to go out there and try to hit the ball hard. I would never advocate for somebody just going up there trying to like put it in play, but I think it's putting yourself in a position to swing as hard as you can, but still make like whatever that, finding that bell curve, like swinging as hard as you can to find the top of that curve, because then there's also, you get on the backside of that curve where you're swinging so hard that the results are actually negative. So finding that ideal swing speed mixed with the tilt. And I think that we're seeing it with Corbin this year, like a little more swing and miss isn't necessarily a bad thing. And especially if you have the hand-eye coordination that a guy like Corbin Carroll does, like, letting it rip a little bit, it leads to positive results over the course of the season. And you just have to, you got to pick your moments. And that's what happens with, being a veteran player. You figure out what your moments are, you learn who you are as a player, and you learn what pitches you're capable of doing that on, and when the right moment is to let it rip. So I think this is a classic, Corbin Carroll sophomore slump, where it was like, weight of the world, expectations after a phenomenal rookie year, and a guy that clearly can make adjustments on the fly year to year. And the Diamondbacks are obviously huge beneficiaries of a guy that is uber talented and has the discipline to look at himself in the mirror and figure out how I need to get better.
Yeah, the third slider that's never on, the third like toggle that's never on these quality of contact pages is sort of bat to ball ability or contact ability, and it's the asterisk on everything, right? So if you look at Junior Caminero and Nick Kurtz, they both have 78 mile an hour bat speed, and Junior Caminero obviously has the 27-degree swing path tilt, and Nick Kurtz has the 40. And so you could say, well, of these two, which is more likely to be judgy? And well, it's Nick Kurtz because he's got the big bat speed and the big swing tilt. But we've also seen that his strikeout rate has kind of exploded when he got to the big leagues. Mm-hmm. And with Junior Caminero, you have this great bat to ball. Like the ideal swing path tilt for both of them might be, hey, Junior Caminero, can you add 2? And Kurtz, could you subtract 2? And a lot of this is situational. I like what you talk about, having different contact points for different parts in the zone. Like, I think Junior Caminero is less likely to be beat at a certain part of the zone over and over again in terms of making contact. But they may also, get ground balls out of him easier than it is with Kurtz. So, maybe you don't even bother with changing Kurtz's swing path tilt. You just say, hey, lay off those high pitches. Just let them go by. Half of them won't be strikes anyway, and so I guess the two other parts that are here are plate discipline and contact ability that affect, what you might do with a player like this. Like Alexander Canario has a pretty interesting line here. I changed the thing so I could see smaller sample guys, and Canario's top 10 in bat speed, 34-degree tilt, 50% ideal attack angle. He looks pretty similar to Kyle Schwarber. So I don't know. I think doing comps and thinking and still thinking about, because this is something that, we had a question on Discord earlier about like, I get all these barrel rate gods, and then they don't work out. And I think that's the same thing can happen here. Is you can be like, oh my God, I love Matt Wallner, and I do love Matt Wallner, but Matt Wallner has the same issue that some of these barrel rate gods does, which is, contact ability. So I like that you can kind of take the flatter paths and maybe see like this guy has a high floor. Maybe the flatter path guys have higher floors.
Yep. I agree with that.
So like, young guys with high floors that you may not expect. Trey Sweeney, flat bat path, 73.8 degree mile per hour bat speed. Augustine Ramirez, 25 degree tilt, 74.6 mile an hour bat path, bat speed. So those are two young guys that have really high floors. And then if you want to do ceiling, you're talking about Nick Kurtz, I think is the guy who really jumps off the page when I do it that way. But Zach DeCenzo, also 40 degree tilt, 73.5 mile per hour bat speed.
Hey, how about Kobe Mayo with 74.6 and a 38 degree? Come on, let's get Kobe Mayo some love. Give him some more plate appearances.
Yeah, and I think a guy like Kurtz, right? Like you watch the swing, you watch the approach. Like this is a guy who's a young player who's facing big league pitching, really for the first time, even in spring training. This guy who's just flew through the minor leagues, and the talent is obvious. I mean, it hits you in the face with the bat speed, and this is a guy that just has to adjust to the type of execute, like the execution that happens at the major league level, and finding out who, like, the pitches that he's going to be able to handle at the big league level. So I think Kurtz is a guy that has all, to your point, has all the ability in the world, and it's just a matter of getting those at bats, understanding who he is as a hitter and the pitches he can handle. And sometimes that's a painful process, especially a guy who accelerated through the minor leagues as quickly as he did.
They're filling up the top of the zone with fastballs.
Correct. And that to your point, like that, like fighting gravity on a 90, with your swing against 97, 98 miles an hour is tough. And then you add in the ability to execute breaking balls down, right? Like that's really, pitching is deception. So you're just trying to mess with people's eye levels. And it just, when you're as talented as Nick Kurtz is, you can go through pretty much every minor league level and dominate just on that alone. And you get to the big leagues and you see the stuff with the execution, and there's an adjustment period, like I said, but they are going to find that hole and they're going to exploit it with every single pitch until you make that adjustment, and then they're going to make that adjustment back. And so that's why that flat swing, or the flattest swing, is just going to have to your point, like you're going to have a higher floor because it's more repeatable.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting stuff for sure. I did the thing suggested to not do. First thing I sorted by when I started clicking around in the leaderboards, I went to the ideal attack angle, and I was looking at the list. I'm like, Corbin Carroll's number 1, Schwarber's 2, a couple surprises with Miguel Vargas, Brenton Doyle up there, Soto. This is a good list. This is the one. This is the air quotes new barrel rate. This is the one.
Well, I mean, these are guys who are going well now. I mean,
right.
That's what I believe in that. Like, this is good at describing what's going on now. I wonder how predictive it is.
Right. That's a fair question to ask. I flipped the leaderboard the other way, though, too. And I'm like, well, who's on the bottom of this leaderboard? Like Xavier Edwards, Stephen Kwan. Okay, they're pretty similar. Oh, there's Vlad Jr., there's James Wood. And I think what that finds is it's guys that hit too many ground balls. Like the power hitters that hit too many ground balls can still end up on here. And again, too many being relative.
You can still be good down here, right? Like Jacob Wilson, Vlad Guerrero Jr., James Wood. Wood and Guerrero are good because they still hit those balls really, really hard. And Wilson, because he just hits all of them. He just has the crazy contact rate.
Yeah, and we talked about Jacob Wilson, right? Like, you're looking at these statistics with the bat speed, he's average swing path tilt. I mean, actually higher at 36 degrees, right? On the higher end, or I guess above the middle of the pack there. And here's a guy, like I said, if you're trying to get more out of him, if you're saying, hey, lift the ball more or swing higher, I think that's steeper. That leads to negative results for Jacob Wilson, right?
He may not have the bat speed or the true talent power to take advantage of that.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a guy who, like I said, you want him with this profile right here. You want that high contact rate because he's gonna hit a lot of line drives in front of the outfielders, right? And then when he finds the gap, then it's going to be doubles and triples because he's not an elite runner, but he's fast enough to find the gap and get to third. So I think this is hopefully what this does. It shows that there's more than one way to be successful, and that you just have to know who you are as a player and what makes you successful. So I think this information, hopefully as it proliferates, is a representation that there's multiple ways to be successful in baseball, and that we shouldn't try to create the exact same blueprint for every single player.
Yeah,
right.
I think the way forward is
multiple
comps.
blueprints to fix it. Yeah, comps, exactly. Like if you have some good things that you're doing and it's not quite working, like look at the slight differences between you and similar hitters who are having more success.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and one of the ways that you can see without necessarily running the numbers, if you change the minimum total swings, and I did it to 10, and then you sort each of them and just look at the top and be like, look at the low sample guys and be like, okay, ideal attack angle. If you do the low sample guys, the top is Nick Ahmed, Jake Rogers, and Tyler Callahan, right?
Yeah.
And you can, and then also up there are David VR, Braxton Fulford, Tyler Tolbert, Eddie Rosario. But if you do this for bat speed and you look at the small sample guys, you do get Riley Adams at the top, who's kind of a backup catcher. But you get Nick Kurtz, who I'm excited about. You get John Kensky Noel. You get Alexander Canario, Matt Wallner, Romy Gonzalez, even Lucan Baker. I'll take that, of anything. Tilt is harder because it's just one way or the other. But small sample, high tilt guys are, I think the high variability guys are Gage Workman is up there. Hye-Seong Kim for some reason. He's a really interesting one because he looks a lot like Freddie Freeman, but I don't know if I believe it. Then there's Dustin Harris, who has 67 mile per hour bat speed and a really steep swing. But again, if you do it the other way, the low sample guys are high floor, Luis Camposano, Ronnie Simon, Yohel Pozo, Matt Shaw, Uli Gurriel. I mean, these are line drive hitters. So I would assume that guys who have the flatter swings would more often have the ideal attack angle, and that it's the tilt that'll come online first and project your attack, like your ideal attack angle percentage.
I know it's a sample. It's about a quarter the size of the competitive swings that Freddie Freeman has had, but that Kim Freeman comparison, that speed, they're within 0.3 miles per hour. They're within 1 degree of each other in swing path tilt. The attack angle is the same at 12 degrees. They're within 2 degrees for attack direction. They're pretty close, even an ideal attack angle.
Like 53 to 48. Yeah, it's pretty
like the intercept points are almost the same. Like Freeman minus 1, Kim 0.5.
I am not suggesting that Hye-Seong Kim is Freddie Freeman.
Well, I think so the other variables, right? Think about like their physical, like their bodies, like they're very physically different humans. So that's got to be part of it. But it's weird. And the other thing that I think we rarely know is the weight of the bat, right? That's such an important variable in all of this. Who do you think?
I think the reason we don't use that,
Kim or Freeman?
It matters. But the reason we don't use it in our analysis is we can't know it.
Yeah,
like we can't know it in any comprehensive way. Like the hitter can know it and the teams can know it, and they can toggle some of that. I would assume that Hye-Seong Kim swings the lighter bat,
just slightly, but like I'm not trying to.
The range isn't that big either, right? What is the range in weights in Major League bats?
Yeah, I mean, I would say generally you're probably between 31 ounces and 34.
Yeah. I mean, it can mean a lot. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't mean anything because we've done this whole thing with long ball labs and everything, but like that's not a huge difference, that you're working with when you're talking about a sample. So just sort of being like, okay, we're just going to assume everyone uses like 32 and a half and that's right in the middle. And that's all we can do.
Let's move on to some other topics here. It sounds like ABS getting closer to becoming a reality in Major League Baseball, maybe as soon as next season. Jed, what do you think the last hurdles really are to get everybody on the same page, or at least to get something closer to an agreement on what will work well to supplement umpires behind the plate? Because I think they're a kind of a part of the conversation that gets pushed to the back a lot of times. It's the league, it's the players, but the umpires have a role in all of this as well.
Yeah, and I think the collective bargaining agreement with the union, the umpires union, accounts for ABS moving forward. So they've kind of crossed that bridge with the umpires, and you look at the accuracy rate this year in balls and strikes. I think it's at the highest level it's ever been with umpires. So I think it goes to show that those guys they want to get it right, and I think when they're equipped with the information that players have and with the tools that they have, like, it's pretty incredible what the human eye is capable of seeing, because guys are throwing harder with more movement, and the umpires continue to get better with the technology that they're provided as well. So I think moving forward, it's just the confidence in the system, the players being on board, and no system is perfect in terms of whether it's full umpire or full ABS. Nothing is going to be perfect, but I think it's just about having the ideal system in place. And I look at the ABS system, and for the variants that could occur. And if you put that into the challenge format, I think it just becomes really compelling. I think from a entertainment standpoint, you still maintain umpire discretion for the most part, where they're actually calling balls and strikes. But then you add this element of of a player being able to challenge that in game in real time. And I think it makes for a more compelling product. So I think it's just, getting the players fully committed and fully on board. No, they're not everybody's going to agree with it, but I think as players move through the minor leagues and graduate to the big leagues that have been exposed to it at the minor league level, you're going to have more and more buy-in to that system.
Yeah, I was a little frustrated with some of this piece was talking a little bit about the expected error in the ABS system. Mm-hmm. And that is undercovered. And I do believe that there is an expected error there. And it might be surprising to people listening, be like, oh, can't the computers just get it right? And the way they put it, the thing that was frustrating to me is the way it's being talked about. We don't have a really great way of porting it over to compare it to what we have now. So, for example, they can say to us that the median error on any pitch is 0.17 inches. And, I asked, Alan Nathan, the baseball's resident physicist, about the source of that error and where the error comes from. He said measurement uncertainty is just, they actually do like they do like a 9-point fit to that describes the path of the ball through space, and there could be an error in that description, right? Then there's calibration, which I think would be caught pretty quickly, because we caught it. We saw some calibration issues early. Like we saw this with the Tigers and the Orioles at times, where if like release points are off in one park, like all of the people like Derek Carty and the guys doing Stuff Plus and all these, they're gonna spot it pretty quickly. All the analysts are gonna spot it pretty quickly, and either just adjust for it, or maybe talk to MLB, they fix the calibration, right? And then there's model uncertainty, and Alan Nathan actually went in and he talked about that sort of that sort of description of the ball through space, and what could, and he said he found the error to be 0.1 to 0.2 inches. Now, okay, that's interesting. So let's say it's 0.2 inches error. What does that mean in terms of calls wrong? That's what I would like to see modeled. What is point? Because we know that right now umpires get it wrong 7% of the time. That's the wrong call percentage. I looked at it, and as you said, it's one of the best of all time. What would 0.2 inches of error create? If it's 6% or 5% wrong, do we really want to do ABS to get 2 percentage points? If it's 1% wrong, maybe we want to do that. But what I really liked about the challenge system was big calls. We don't get the big calls wrong. There's no game hopefully decided on one bad call at the end of the game. And two, I thought it was entertaining, for the people at the game, I thought, and this is the weirdest one. I don't know if Jed will agree with me on this, but I thought it was entertaining to the players. And I thought that it took the steam out of the interaction between hitters and catchers and umpires, because what I saw in the spring was challenge it. You start griping, you're like, oh, I want to strike. And then the umpire goes, challenge it. You have some power in the situation. And,
exactly right.
Umpires were saying, like, well, I'm 50-50 on challenges today. You roll the dice, So I saw laughter. I saw like taking the air out of it, because you do have it gives the hitter some power.
Totally.
It gives the catcher some power that they can actually do something about a bad call. So I'm leaning towards the challenge system. I think that the ABS could lead to some unintended consequences of how we pitch design, how we develop pitchers, what kind of pitchers we have. And I also feel uneasiness about, having to relitigate the strike zone to half inches every off season, so that like every off season, the players and MLB have to meet and be like, oh, we want to shave a half inch off the top of the strike zone. Oh, goddamn. Again. We talked about this just last year. Okay, fine, whatever. And generally, when it comes to rule changes, the shift of power is in baseball's favor. Yeah. Players can push it off a year. In the new CBA, basically, they can push off rule changes a year, but they can't push it off indefinitely. There's basically like, you can kind of push it off, but you can't, at some point, we're just going to do a rule change. And since that balance of power has shifted, basically, the baseball could do whatever it wanted with the strike zone if it had the computers. They maybe can't do it anyway, but they could be doing they could be fiddling with it every offseason the way they seem to fiddle with the ball. And I just think that'd be exhausting.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but I think at the end of the day, it's about getting it right. It's about having a good product, a good entertaining product. And I think it's just like trust in the system, like belief in the system that it's about getting it right. So the result that we're watching is the result that happens, and what is ultimately called. So I think it's just, it's about getting it right. And it's about, the product. And I think that's where the challenge system provides the best route forward for all that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting after doing this in the spring. One thing players have wanted was to see the proposed ABS zone overlaid on the video they watch with the zone as it's being called right now, because they're not the same. And I just think consistency level to level, the same strike zone at AAA, same strike zone in the big leagues, kind of seems like a big deal. Like whenever we get to this point, that's going to be kind of a low key, nice upgrade, because I feel like it's hard enough already to make the level jump, to face better pitching, but then also have to recalibrate where the strike zone is.
Yeah, we were just talking about Nick Kurtz. He had a 20% strikeout rate all the way up to AAA. It jumped in AAA with ABS. And what we saw when we reported that the strike zone is different this year is that the strike zone is basically what it was in AAA last year with the challenge system. So he is still dealing with, getting to know this new strike zone that was not at all the same as what he saw in AA.
Yeah, and I mean, on top of that it's just pure like stuff and execution too. Right. Like that, the combination of all three of those things. But yeah, I mean, you also have to look at the ability to throw strikes at the lower levels of the minor leagues. Like, we're talking about game time, like, it's like the little league strikes. I'm not comparing a AA, pitcher to a little leaguer, but I'm saying that the command at the AA level is not what it is at the big league level. And so
taking advantage of the zone too.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and so, the expectation for execution at the big league level on both sides of the ball is higher. And so, you have to go up there and expect that the execution is going to be better. And if that means that the strike zone is slightly different, I mean, the strike zone is the strike zone, but I think you also got umpires at the minor league level, that are learning the strike zone themselves.
That's a good point. One other thing in this story that I wanted to throw at you guys. both players and umpires have informally raised the possibility of ABS, including that buffer zone, that would allow certain close calls to stand even if they're overturned by the system. I don't know about that. That seems like it invites a lot of chaos. So like you're close enough on the call, and even though it's technically wrong, the player loses the challenge in that case, and we just move on with the incorrect call. Like, why would we choose that?
So who is? I say that again. So who's suggesting that? That's the players,
players and umpires informally. So I don't. This is
not a formal request.
Burger.
Yeah,
but why would you even want that? That just seems like it would invite more chaos and frustration into a process.
What we want is
have some clarity.
We want one zone, and that would create another zone. That would be like, here's a third zone, the ABS challenge buffer zone.
Yeah, I couldn't come up with a reason for that to be a good idea. It's clearly someone was pushing for. I'd have to speculate. Maybe that comes more from the umpire side to maintain their relevance. Hey, we really weren't off by that much. We don't want to get graded harshly on our any more harshly than we already are on the zone. Like, they're graded on a pretty tough curve, I think, at this point.
But I think it was like almost 50-50 on challenges anyway. So I don't know.
Yeah,
it was weird.
No,
but
I'll just I'll just go like these umpires. They do. I mean, like I said, they continue to do a better job as they're introduced to the technology and the grading systems, and it just shows how adaptable they are. And these guys want to get it right, and they do a really good job. Right? It's hard to stand back there for 2.5, 3 hours, and everything kind of falls on your shoulders as an umpire too, right? That's the outcomes of games can be determined by these guys, and they want to get it right. I think, the vast majority of guys standing back there want to get it right, and they're doing a better job of that as the technology proliferates.
I mean, just look at how quickly they changed the way the zone is enforced. They just this offseason had a change in their collectively bargained agreement that changed the way that they were being enforced, and they changed the strike zone. Like it changed. Like they changed in one off season, and their ability to do that is pretty impressive. So I don't know.
Agree.
I think the challenge system is the best way out, but I do want a uniform strike zone across all levels, and just this idea that there's also the front of the plate, which is kind of like what the strike zone is on TV, and then there's the back of the square part of the plate, which is where the ABS strike zone is. So already there's two zones. There's two zones right now. And I've heard people suggest that there's a third zone, which is the entire 3D space above the plate, but I could not find that in the rule book. But that is what some people think is the strike zone, right? It's the entire 3D space above the plate, but I could not find that specific.
And that's that's what I ultimately like. I just come back to the confidence in what it is. Everybody knows what it is. To your point, one zone, and we play to that, right? And you just as you get more repetition and as you get more experience with whatever that zone is, then everybody's on the same playing field.
Yeah.
Jed, I think you mentioned there's a story from the Wall Street Journal, maybe Monday, a Jared Diamond story about defining check swings using the barrel to knob angle. Like that, that seems like a good idea, because check swings, those are pretty borderline calls, and they're really tough calls to make.
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, this is where, one of these rules that has just been very subjective. I mean, completely subjective, because everybody's got a different definition, and the rule book, doesn't really define what it is. And so I love the idea of having some objective way to measure it. And once again, like, this just goes like the more these umpires get exposed to let's just pick it, right? Like if it's a 45-degree angle, right? Knob to barrel, like you break that 45-degree plane of knob to barrel angle, and you show this to umpires and they study it, they're going to get it right. And so, I think having a clearly defined rule allows these guys to know what the expectation is, and then hitters and pitchers and defense, the more you're exposed to that, the more you see, if there is a defined rule, then we're going to get it right. So, but setting the expectation of what that is, of what a check swing is, and working from there, it just makes it a clearly defined rule, which it is not currently.
Yeah, that's what I always wanted for the sticky stuff enforcement too, was just to have some sort of test. You know, you could have a ball, put it on like a wiffle ball, put it on their hand. If it sticks, they're out. If it falls, they're in. You know, like just have objective tests, because you know, there was that one time that guy was massaging Madison Bumgarner's hand, you know, looking deep into his eyes with rage.
Super weird.
Super weird. And I was just like, this is what we don't want. We don't want people that have some sort of, you know, personal grudge or something, just throwing a guy out for, oh, his hands are a little sticky, you know. You know, so I think the same thing was, I think knob to bear, we will probably argue, there will be yelling about what constitutes a swing, but at some point we can come to a consensus about what constitutes a swing, and then we can actually measure it, and we can get there right now. So, and you're right, as soon as they define it, if that could be open to challenge or something, then you know, they will know that they could be challenged on that, and they could, and then they'll start to adhere to, that's what the evidence has been. As soon as we can measure it and we can show it to them, and apparently they have to watch the whole game after they're done. They have to watch like their calls. So like, you know, if you include check swing calls on that and you have the little angle thing on it, they'll learn it quickly.
No doubt.
I was disappointed to learn back when the sticky stuff stories first broke that the machines that measure how sticky something is, the tests for that, they're all large machines. They're not easy to incorporate on the field. You'd like wheel out a huge cart, and they're very much they're lab equipment. They are not on field equipment.
Just in the dugout, this huge machine. The umpire's like, stick your hand to the machine.
People would be afraid, I think, looking at these things. One more question before we go, guys. Which 2025 prediction would you tee up again? Which one would you take a mulligan on, so to speak, if you were able to do so here in the final 10, 11 days of May? Mine's an easy one. I called the Orioles-Rays ALCS matchup with the Rays winning, and I'm not completely toast on the Rays winning the AL pennant. I don't feel good about it, but I feel like that combo is pretty much impossible. So I think that's probably the prediction I'd want back. I think I've completely messed up the AL East and the AL playoff picture this year, and we're not even 2 months into the season yet.
Yeah, I don't think they have the pitching. You know, even if Grayson comes back and is an ace, that gives them like 1.5, 2 pitchers. You know, so I think there's some work needs to be done there, and maybe they can just get so hot on offense, you know, but still they've dug themselves in quite a hole. I doubt it's going to happen. I think you're gonna want to take that one back. I've got a couple in just Joey Ortiz and Osvaldo Bido. My caveat is just that, like, you know, the two of them, you know, if they were sort of fantasy takes, and the two of them didn't cost people a ton in terms of where they got them in drafts. And I to some extent still want to go shopping in this territory, which is, you know, like decent stuff, multiple fastballs, a good breaking ball, you know, and opportunity. For Joey Ortiz, it's decent skills across the board. I do go back and look at, you know, Joey Ortiz's barrel rate last year. You know, I guess there aren't a lot of success stories around him. Maikel Garcia is probably the closest to a success story around him. Maybe Anthony Volpe, Mason Wynn. Are those enough success stories to say, I just got the wrong one? You know, I did say Mason Wynn would be good this year, and he's been pretty good. You know, is it still a decent place to shop where you're like, hey, these are young players that barreled okay, but not great, and could grow into something and have defensive value? I see enough in Maikel Garcia and Anthony Volpe and Mason Wynn to say, all right, maybe Joey Ortiz just wasn't the right one out of that 5 or 4. But there are a lot of non-success stories around. Jared Triolo, Ernie Clement, Jose Caballero, Abraham Toro. You know, it's not the best place to shop. generally. So maybe I undervalued barrels. That would be crazy. I'm the barrel guy.
I guess it's possible, but yeah, the Bideau thing, the only thing that scared me away, aside from the park change, which applied for all of the A's pitchers this year, was the command track record. Like that to me was the flag that you had to just look past. And we've seen guys get by because the stuff was good enough, and below average command didn't necessarily matter. I just felt like the margin for error got a lot smaller moving out of the Coliseum and moving up into Sacramento this year.
Weirdly, is the best year of his career for command.
Yeah. It's strange, isn't it?
the stuff went away. Yeah. I mean, I guess, but I think also long-term track record is something to consider with both these players. In Bideau's case with Pittsburgh, he only struck out guys 20% of the time. So to some extent, the 24% we saw last year with Oakland was the outlier. That's just something to think about.
How about you, Jed? Any predictions from the beginning of the season that you want back?
I had the Red Sox and the Dodgers in the World Series. I still feel pretty good about that. I think the Red Sox are in good position. And their lineup seems pretty deep to me. They've given up a lot of runs, 227 runs so far. So, you'd like to see the pitching be, a little bit better for them to make it that far, but I still feel decent about that. The one I did pick was Gunnar Henderson to win MVP, and I think that was more, that's nothing to say against Gunnar. Like here's a guy that are seven homers, hitting 250 after starting the year on the IL, with an intercostal strain. So still like young, dynamic player. I think what I did is I just underestimated Judge coming back and having an even better year than he did in 2024, which is just, we're watching, Ruthian type production from a guy who, at age 33, hitting, 400 with 15 homers and an OPS of 249. It's incredible to watch. And, I think if I do get a mulligan, I just don't, underestimate Aaron Judge's ability to continue to produce and not only produce, but get better.
He's on pace right now for almost 14 WAR. It's just that's not real.
Right now, the MVP races are fairly boring. It seems like it's probably Ohtani and Judge again.
Yeah, exactly.
But with regards to Gunnar, I think there's also just maybe a little bit of trying to put the team on his shoulders. Mm-hmm. He's swinging more than he did last year. He's chasing more than he did last year, hitting more grounders and striking out more. The underlying stuff is still there in terms of, swinging the bat fast, hitting the ball hard. And I think the eye will return at some point. Just a little bit of team success will go a long way for Gunnar, I think, where there's runners on base in front of him, and so he thinks, instead of trying to hit a homer right now, we just need to move this line along, and it's not all on me. He's going to make that realization at some point. It's not all on me. And so I think he'll still get to the end of the season with like a 275 batting average, which means he's going to get hot at some point batting average wise. Yep. And I actually think he'll still hit like 32, 34 homers, have like 15 stolen bases, something that could win. I think you're right. Like something that could still win MVP in a year that Judge wasn't doing what he's doing
in a normal year, but this is clearly not a normal year with Judge off to the start he's off to, and really just rolling right off of what he's been doing for the last couple of seasons on a per game basis. It is crazy, unbelievable. But somehow I think all of us underestimated Aaron Judge in that regard. We are going to go on our way out the door. Reminder, you can join our Discord with the link in the show description. You can find Eno on Bluesky, Sarris.bsky.social. Jed is over on the Instagram. I am dvr.bsky.social. Thanks to me for putting this one together, actually. I'm going to edit this episode on the plane on the way to New York. Thanks to both of you for moving this recording up a day. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Friday.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.